Sheehan, may we have the roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Paul,
Here.
Commissioner Greavy,
Here.
Commissioner Evans,
Present.
Commissioner Warblin,
Here.
Commissioner Matthews,
Here.
Commissioner Cruzen,
Present.
and Chairperson Childs.
Present. Commissioner Evans, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Information on providing public comments. Persons wishing to address the Planning Commission on subjects not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission, provided that no action may be taken on off-agenda items except as authorized by law. Off-agenda items from the public will be taken under consideration without discussion by the Commission and may be referred to staff. Comments will be accepted in person or via Zoom. Public comment instructions are as follows. To speak on an agenda item in person, please complete a speaker's card and give it to the secretary before the meeting or at the latest prior to the time for public comments on that item. When joining via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature or press *9 on your phone to request to speak. You will be called on by name and will have 3 minutes to speak. Next on the agenda, we'll have the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
I second.
It has been moved and properly seconded to approve the agenda as submitted. We will vote by roll call. Mrs. Sheehan, will you conduct the roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Paul,
Yes.
Commissioner Greavy,
Approve.
Commissioner Evans,
Yes.
Commissioner Warblin,
Approve.
Commissioner Matthews,
Approved.
Commissioner Cruzen,
Approved.
and Chairperson Childs.
Approved. Now we will have the approval of the minutes from our November 9th, 2022 meeting. Are there any changes to those minutes?
There are not.
Do I have the motion to approve the minutes?
I approve the minutes for November 9, 2022.
Is there a second?
I do the second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as submitted. Mrs. Sheehan, will you conduct the roll call?
Commissioner Paul,
Yes.
Commissioner Greavy,
Approve.
Commissioner Evans,
Approve.
Commissioner Warblin,
Yes.
Commissioner Matthews,
Approved.
Commissioner Cruzen,
Yes.
Chairperson Childs.
Approved. So now we're down to the public comment section of our agenda, and this is the time for the public to speak on items not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. I will now open the public comment period. Do we have any speaker cards?
I do not have any speaker cards.
Okay. Okay. Do we have any speakers via Zoom?
We do not.
Okay. I will now close the public comment period. Now we're going to move on to scheduled matters. The next item on the agenda is scheduled matters. For each itemized item, there will be presentation by city staff. For items that involve application requests, I will then ask the applicant to address the commission if they so desire. Then I will open the comment period via Zoom and in-house. I will close the comment period after all comments have been provided and after all our questions regarding the testimony during the comment period have been answered. After the comment period is closed, the commission will deliberate on the item and may have additional questions for staff. We cannot take additional testimony or questions from the public after the comment period is closed. So our first agenda item for presentation is the City of Fairfield's homeless strategy presentation by David Gasaway, our interim city manager.
Trying to make this full screen, but it doesn't seem. Yeah, it was a PDF, not a. Well, you want to know what? We'll just get rolling with it here. Up here comes Jake to save the day.
Not Jake State Farm.
All right. Well, we'll just roll with it. All right. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, David Gasaway, interim city manager. I am going to be your stand-in for this presentation this evening. Typically, our homeless services manager, Dawn Labar, would probably be giving this presentation, but she's out on leave currently, and so you are unfortunately getting the lesser of the presenters tonight. So I believe at one of your prior meetings, there was a request for some general update on the city's homeless strategy and what we're doing with homelessness, and that's what I'm here to present for you tonight. Quick overviews. Our homeless service division was created in 2020. It is ultimately, it is sort of functionally a central coordinating division for communications with our service providers, other partner agencies, outside agencies, and internal departments to coordinate all that is going on related to homelessness within the city of Fairfield. The mission of the division is to reduce homelessness and the impacts of homelessness. And in fact, earlier this year when we took to the city council, based on their council retreat earlier in the year where they identified what their priorities are, that is perfectly in line with the council's priority for homelessness, which is reduce homelessness and the impacts of homelessness. The responsibilities, here's sort of a list, but off to the left, I think really kind of speaks to what it is. It's a central intake for homeless issues, and then that helps us then to coordinate, again, amongst the different divisions. We really focus on recently on sheltering and temporary housing opportunities through grants and services based on service needs identified within the organization, does community outreach, and then we are working to improve and more robustly utilize data to identify the solutions then, particularly where there are gaps within the services that are provided within Fairfield. And then one of the things that we had started working on, and we are just by way of a little additional information, a little bit short-staffed. We also recently lost a staff member. They got a great promotional opportunity in another city, and so unfortunately we lost them. Selena Sanchez was a management analyst, and so we are short-staffed. But we were also working with regionally on BIPOC issues, which is Black, Indigenous, and peoples of color, which disproportionately, if you look at our homeless population, are BIPOC. And so starting to more equitably deliver services to particularly those communities. Keep on rolling here. Just so that everybody's on the same page, the HUD definition of homelessness is basically 4 categories. There's literally homeless, which is exactly what you might think. It's an individual or family who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. Category 2 then is imminent risk of homelessness. And that's an individual or family who will immediately lose their primary nighttime residence, provided that that residence will be lost within 14 days of the date of application, that they have no subsequent residence has been identified, and they lack, and this is a sort of a critical component of the definition, the individual or family lacks the resources or support networks needed to obtain some form of permanent housing. And each of the additional categories 3 and 4 utilizes that same category or definition. If you think about, if you really think about it, folks that just don't have that support network, either they've burned bridges through that support network through mental health issues or all too commonly drug and alcohol addiction issues. Then maybe they've lost that network of family or friends that most of us would turn to in those situations when you were needing some additional assistance in a time of need. Category 3, homeless under other federal statutes, which would be unaccompanied youth under age 25, or families with children and youth who otherwise qualify as homeless under the definition. And there, very specifically, it's more have not had a lease, ownership interest, or occupancy agreement in permanent housing for the prior 60-day period, and have experienced persistent instability as measured by 2 moves or more during the preceding 60 days. And I share these definitions because when you start diving down into the HUD definitions of homelessness, it's a much broader category of folks than necessarily just the people we see on the streets. day in and day out. And then category 4 is fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. Once again, has no other residence and lacks those resources or network in order to obtain other permanent housing. And I'm sharing these categories because what we focus mostly on, I think, in our minds is that literally homeless. Again, the person you see on the street, and there are ways and strategies in which, and I'll talk a little bit about what Cap Solano, where focusing on some of these other categories, particularly imminent risk of homelessness, winds up being a little bit more of a cost-effective way to combat homelessness. Because once folks are literally homeless, depending on the time, and they become chronically homeless, where they've been on the streets years, maybe even decades, then those mental health issues and the trust issues and the services needed then to get them sort of out of that mindset and build trust and get back into a productive life becomes just that much harder. And unfortunately, in speaking with a lot of our service providers here, increasingly it is those chronically, literally homeless folks that are, really need deep service assistant case management in order for them to get back on their feet. So we also then, homeless services, as led by Don, also coordinates then what we call our Quality of Life Task Force, which is really just representatives of 4 critical departments. So homeless services out of the city manager's department, our police department homeless intervention team, our homeless engagement and response team in public works. They're the ones that do a lot of the encampment cleanups, and then our housing services department, which is really focused on producing additional affordable housing units, because if you really think about homelessness, a lot of it comes down to you have a housing problem, and I can speak to that a little bit. So recent accomplishments, what we're really focused on here in this year and moving into the next year is talking about better regional coordination, which was one of the primary components of City Council's priorities. And so I have to, every time I give any talks on this topic, I definitely give a huge shout out to our city council, particularly Vice Mayor Rick Vaccaro and Councilwoman Doris Panduro. They really were leading voices regionally in forming what started out as, it was called the 2x2 on homelessness, which was 2 elected representatives from each of the cities. I think it started with Vacaville and Vallejo and then Benicia and Dick. And so pretty soon it was all of them. And that led then recently to the reformation of the Community Action Partnership Solano Joint Powers Authority. And since you don't want to have to say that multiple times fast, it's just Cap Solano JPA. Which is now reformed their board, which is now those 2 elected officials from each of the cities in Solano County and 2 supervisors from the County Board of Supervisors. They meet monthly. In fact, tomorrow night over at the county building right here in downtown Fairfield, they have their monthly meeting. It's an open public meeting. I encourage people to come hear what's going on there, because the recognition was that we really were not coordinating services across jurisdictional boundaries in a robust way. And this is an issue, homelessness, that isn't just central to any one city or organization. It's really a problem that is blended across borders. And so that coordination is critical. And so in terms of an accomplishment, that is a huge accomplishment that we have gotten this far. Recently, you may have heard in the news, City of Sacramento and County of Sacramento are forming some partnership similar to this. Well, that's 2 entities. We in Solano County have every single incorporated city and the County of Solano working together on a month-by-month basis in order to really address issues across boundaries. And so it's a monumental accomplishment that happened here in this past year. We increased shelter beds. There is a case, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, Boise, I forget the exact case, but basically it said that a local jurisdiction can enforce any ordinances or rules where people are sleeping on public property if you don't have some place to send them. And so one of the things that we've really focused on here in the last year plus is adding to our shelter capacity. And so over at Shelter Solano, that's 310 Beck Avenue, we recently upped the number of beds that we fund. Luckily, the bulk of the money that we pay for those beds, right now we pay for 25 beds, access to 25 beds. The bulk of that money comes from the Permanent Local Housing Allocation, PLHA, which is a grant funding program through the state of California. A few years ago, the state adopted regulations to where now every time residential real estate is transacted, there's a $75 fee that's tacked onto that. That funds the PLHA program. We then are an entitlement jurisdiction, so we get a little north of $600,000 per year that basically automatically comes to us, and these types of services are the types of things that we can fund with that money. We also, right towards the end of last year, opened up Community Action North Bay Can Be. This is a shelter and transitional living property down on Ohio Street in downtown Fairfield. That is right around, there's kind of different classifications, but ultimately it's about 26 beds, 26 individuals that can be housed there. And then it's partially, so it's funded with community development block grant funds, as well as tenant-based rental assistance. So on the back side of the property, the front side of the property is really the sheltering services. And then on the back side of the property, there's 3 two-bedroom apartments. And through tenant-based rental assistance, some of the revenue that goes in for those folks that are paying rent in transitional housing goes back to also help to subsidize the services that are provided by Can Be for the people living in the shelter. And so that got opened. And then Mission Samoa Homeless to Work program, they concluded here earlier in the year, I want to say sometime around June. And what that program is basically it's individuals go through a program where they receive shelter, food, case management in exchange, and other resources, linkage to resources in exchange for work experience. So basically, they get a place to stay so long as they're willing to go through programming and job training and the like. Mission Samoa actually has, they own their own auto shop near their property, and so they're training some of those skills. They also have relationships with, for example, like Valero Oil down in Benicia at the refinery, and so they're trying to link people back into stable employment so that they can get back on their feet and get out of sheltering. And then very recently, and so with that Homeless to Work program, we're actually in the process. I think the contract was just executed. We've extended now for another year. We went through a competitive request for proposal process. Mission Samoa's program came out on top again, and so we've refunded that for another year. And then last, just a minor accomplishment, but something that I felt was really important. We improved our encampment reporting. We would get particularly a lot of emails. People would email our HIT team or email Homeless Services or email City Manager's office and say, hey, there's folks camping over here. Now we've tried to make it as simple as possible. If you go to fairfield.ca.gov/camp, there is an online reporting, and so it's basically just a simple form. You put in the information. You can also, it's the web-based version of our My Fairfield CA app. So in the Apple's App Store or the Android App Store, you can get My Fairfield CA. In there, you can report them as well. That helps us, for one, coordinate then any responses with both our HIT team and our HEART team. When they go out and it's a location, we're required under the Boise case, we have to post the camps for 72 hours before we can clean them up. So HIT goes out, they do the posting, and then 72 hours later, our HEART team comes along in Public Works and cleans up any debris that's been left over. And so for reporting those encampments, this is an easy way that we put out there. And then just a couple of statistics along those lines. At Shelter Solano, where we have the 25 beds, since July 1 of 2021 to up until October 31st. That's the easiest data I had available. We have served, or enrolled, I should say, 365 individuals at Shelter Solano through the services provided there. And our HEART team, in coordination with our HIT team, in 2022 cleaned up 1,322 cubic yards of debris from encampments. Just to give you some scale to what that means, that's approximately half the size of an Olympic-sized swimming pool, which is a very big space, right? Very big space when you're talking about it in those terms. So what is our strategy, our current initiatives really? We are continuing to work with Mission Samoa, and this is an expansion of some of the services that they provide. We are, I think the request for proposal for contractors just went out last week. We're going to be building, in partnership with Mission Samoa, a pallet shelter. The picture that's on your screen to the right there is a picture of pallet shelters. They're called pallet shelters because basically they are like reinforced fiberglass panels that can be set up in about an hour, and they break down to about the size of a pallet. So they're really easy to ship anywhere, quick to set up. There's one bedroom or one occupant and two occupant versions. Last year, I don't know if, I think it might have just gone straight to City Council, but we actually had to modify our building code requirements for occupancy because these end up being smaller than what our code otherwise required. So we modified the code, and now we'll be doing the infrastructure work that's necessary, which will be electrical, water, sewer, to set up the pallet shelters. So there will be 12 pallets, which will serve 16 participants, 8 one-bedroom or one person, and then 4 double occupancy units. We are hoping to get that up and running here right after the first of the year. Again, building more of that sheltering capacity. Shelter Solano, their commercial kitchen, that's over at 310 Beck. They have a beautiful building built, but there have been delays, and so they are currently waiting on, they have sort of some of the kitchen equipment, and they're waiting, unfortunately, until January for the contractor to actually come back and install the equipment. And then sometime in January, they expect to also have delivery of all of their appliances. So what's unique about the kitchen and the way they designed is it will also have a work training component to it. And so either baking or cooking, they will have folks from the campus will be working there within the kitchen. The kitchen's designed to serve their whole campus, but also then we'll have job training skills for people that can get into, build culinary skills and get jobs in restaurants. We're collaborating between our HIT team, North Bay Medical Center, and County Behavioral Health. And I think we might have a little bit of a twofer here, and sort of a street medicine team. So one of the gaps, one of the challenges is our HIT officers are out there, and they're really trying to build the relationships with homeless individuals, and encourage them to get into services. Well, they are not at all trained clinically to diagnose people out in the field, or necessarily to determine what types of healthcare services they may need. That then results a lot of times in costs to North Bay Health, because folks may sometimes abuse the system. They'll go into the emergency room, and that might just be they're looking to get out of the weather, or they want a meal and a bed to stay in, and that's not necessarily being coordinated then within the social service side of homeless services. So we're looking to form a partnership with them, where we might utilize either through County Behavioral Health or even through North Bay, trained clinicians. It might be a physician's assistant or a nurse that would go out with our HIT team to help to diagnose in the field, identify those types of services that people might need where they're at, and then we can be more responsive. We'll also be working here as we kick off the new year, increasing our marketing and our public education, getting this type of information out on the types of things that Fairfield is doing, as well as on our website. So we're in the process right now of updating our website. You might remember earlier in the year, you may have read in the newspaper, there was a grand jury report talked about some of the lack of transparency with a lot of the services. Well, one of the things that was on there was any contracts we have for service providers, what those services are being provided, what are those terms. So we're working to get our website updated so it's much more clear with a lot of that information. Again, much more public information, education, and transparency. And then we are beginning the efforts to work on a regional navigation center and regional navigation center plan. So under the umbrella of CAP Solano, which is this regional coordination, there is a regional navigation plan that has been considered where 310 Beck Avenue, Shelter Solano would be converted to a navigation center. City of Vallejo right now is in the process. They may have already acquired the property, and they're going through the development process to build a navigation center. And then Vacaville is looking at property where they would acquire and construct a navigation center. So what is a navigation center? Navigation center ultimately is really someplace, it's quasi-shelter-like, but it's designed to help to navigate people into custom service plans that they need in order to get the help in the variety of ways. So, you could have an individual that has mental health issues. Well, depending on what those are, if it's schizophrenia versus, some other type of mental health issue, they may need different type of counseling and support, or, drug and alcohol addiction, that is a certain type of support. Could be, dual dependent, right? Both of those things could be going on at the same time. And then, helping them navigate into transitional housing. That's something that I don't have up here, but that we're starting to also take a look at through our Housing Services Department. While we're able to get people into the sheltering, there starts to be a bottleneck with some of those folks where, let's say they're going through their case management, they're going through their programming, they're now at a point where, okay, they could go into some form of transitional housing where they're sort of self-sufficient with still, daily case management, but they don't necessarily need to be in a shelter. Shelter's not designed for someone just to live in, for a year or a year plus. So that transitional housing component that's that next step of where they go. And that is an area where we have a deficit of that type of housing here in Solano County in general, let alone in Fairfield. Planning Commission, previously you have approved project, the Fairhaven Commons project over off of Santa Monica, which is a mid-pen project. That project, 72 units of affordable housing with 44 of the units designed as permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, so that folks that are in sheltering that can move on but still need that sort of intensive assistance can have some place to go. We're looking for additional properties right now. We received $1 million from the state of California into our housing trust fund, and so we're looking to use those funds potentially to acquire property for additional transitional housing, and then leverage that against additional opportunities for grant funds out of the state of California to provide the services that would then be needed. So that's kind of a current initiatives, and that's sort of that strategy, filling those gaps really of where there's breakdowns. So what all can the public do? Well, there's 4 ways to make a difference. A lot of our service providers are always looking for volunteers. They're always looking for donations. They're certainly advocacy. This is a problem that got solved, or that got created over decades. It's not going to be solved overnight, and it costs a lot of money to solve this problem. And so we can use advocacy from the public at the state and federal level to flow more dollars into the services. Cities in California are not really in the social service business. That's typically more of the counties. But we're all learning that we can't just have that divide. There has to be sort of a melding of how these services get delivered, and with that has to come resources, and the state and federal government are the ones that would have the financial capacity to assist. And then SMILE. These are people, and I have found a number of times it's amazing the response you get just if you look someone in the eyes and smile and say hello. How are you doing? They are people, and need that respect. Here's information, just resources. Again, fairfield.ca.gov, under our homeless services page. All of our information is there for any of the resources. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
David, we'd like to thank you for an outstanding presentation. Planning Commission, do we have any comments or questions?
Hi, I would would just like to say that was very comprehensive, and just really like to thank you for that update in your time. I wanted to know about a program I heard about a while ago that was going to happen, because with Fairfield being the county seat, it was explained that a lot of times people get arrested in other places around the county who are homeless, and then they get to jail, and when they get released, they often don't have transportation back to the city that they live in. So I was wondering if you can give us an update on that program. The name of it, it eludes me right now, but the whole purpose of it was to be able to provide rides so folks can get back to the cities that they live in, not to shift people around, but so that each city bears its own responsibility for its residents.
So we still offer that. It's a taxi, a taxi, Lyft, Uber program that we fund. One of the challenges we've had, and so we still do that. We send people back to their point of origin on fairly frequent occasions, and in fact we have also successfully helped people relocate to other places to reconnect with family. And we don't just, again, it's not just, hey, here's a bus ticket, get on the bus, get out of here. It's, okay, you have, a cousin, a parent, an aunt, and, whomever that family or friend is in some other location. We then follow up to make sure that they have connected, so that they arrived, that they got connected with that, with that person. And so we do that, and our HIT team does a phenomenal job of helping people in that way. One of the challenges we have is exactly to what you're speaking to, where, not picking on any specific city, just using an example. Let's say city of Dixon, Dixon PD arrests somebody, they bring them down, they bring them into the jail, and then, within 24 hours or whatever the number is, based on whatever the crime they've committed, then they're discharged. That has been happening in effect around the clock, right? So at any point in time, whatever that time, the time frame is, they're discharged. So that could be 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, at 2 o'clock in the morning, not a lot of cabs out. We don't pay to have a cab just sitting there waiting. And so we've had conversations with the sheriff's department to better coordinate those release times, so that at least we know when those windows are, and if we have someone that we need to utilize that program, it's at a time where, okay, now there's resources available. We have people available in order to assist, as well as those rides are available to assist at those times, as opposed to just, hey, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, here's your stuff, get out. Which unfortunately does happen. So we've had those conversations about coordinating release times.
That's great. I'm really glad to hear that. And then I have another question about some of the upcoming programs. I was just wondering if you found that we have the actual capacity to support new programs, because as we all know, there's a staffing shortage everywhere. So I'm just wondering what that looks like in terms of, we're going to have new navigational centers. Will we have the staff to support these new endeavors?
That is a great question, and that's stuff we're looking at. So as we're building this out, so our efforts right now is to modify Shelter Solano. My personal goal is by June of next year to convert to navigation, or at least be on the path to where we've defined exactly, these are those services, this is the cost of those services, here's the performance metrics of those services, and be on the way. Now the property will require some capital improvements in order to provide the level of service and the types of services needed for navigation. But staffing has been a challenge. I mean, not only with us, but with service providers, where it's a buyer's market for employees at this point in time, which is a challenge, and that's a reality. We're in about to start conversations with Solano County about some form of street outreach beyond just the medicine or healthcare side of it, but also just people that can go out that are non-uniformed. It is tough sometimes for officers to build a relationship with somebody, be making progress in that relationship, and then unfortunately that individual violates the law in some way where, now it's an enforcement and, it's hard for the officers to be both. Our HIT team does a fantastic job of playing that role, but, there's another side of it. And so having some form of outreach folks out on the street, and the county is interested in that as well. And so my hope is to forge some sort of pilot project that could potentially be taken on later on by Capilano, so that that type of outreach can be done in a way that kind of provides flexibility. So instead of it just being in one city or one boundary, you can have a force multiplier effect in multiple places where you can have 10 people in one location at a time, or spread out across the county. And so we're in the next week or two, actually, we meet with the county. Today we met with Contra Costa County, who has a similar program. The way they do the staffing, because the county in Contra Costa was also having those same challenges. They just couldn't recruit, hire, onboard, train fast enough, and so they ended up partnering with a nonprofit agency that I think is a statewide entity. And that nonprofit, then they're a little bit more nimble in terms of that hiring practice. And so we're going to be reaching out to them and learning a little bit more about how, what is their turnover rate? What's that look like? What's the training look like? And, just we're in the process of trying to learn best practices from anybody we can talk to.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Any other commissioners?
I really appreciate all the comprehensive program. You have it. And
Dave,
sorry.
as you always do, that was an excellent presentation. Would it be possible to have staff email us the slide deck that you presented?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I really appreciate all that comprehensive program you have it. And I do have one incident. It happened to one of my friends. He had an apartment building in Vallejo, and one of the homeless guy broke into his apartment, and he was there. And then he had been running post to pillar to get him evicted. But do we have any program like that for our general landlords in the city? If something happens, he doesn't have to knock at the doors of the court. Instead, he can come to the city, and if we can chart out some program for like that to help the landlords to evict the homeless people, so he can get his place vacated from them.
That specific example, I wouldn't want to speak for necessarily. We do have, in this last year, the police department created, in addition to the HIT team, the community action team, the CAT team. And what they are is they're really more of a special unit that's focused on solving those types of unique issues. And so they work with business owners. They will work with property owners, residential property owners, to identify, okay, there's some sort of ongoing issue that's causing problems. Let's start to address the core of whatever that problem is, as opposed to it always just being a call for service, roll out a black and white, an officer goes out and responds. And that's not, it's frustrating for property owners when it's kind of that back and forth. It's frustrating for the police department when it's just that back and forth. And so the CAT team is focused on, addressing those types of issues that pop up where, okay, well, that doesn't fit cleanly into any one box. And then they can go in, they can work with the property owners then to address, whatever variety of those types of challenges might be had.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners?
I had a quick question. I'm super happy that, some of the accolades or the programs that we've put in this year. Do you guys have any plans on addressing these resources to the public? I mean, after this presentation, I feel more enlightened. I didn't know that there were other resources, that you can call, or not necessarily report, but you can call, and when you see people, that are in camping, especially in areas that are prone to fires. Do you guys have any plans on how you guys would bring out that information to the public besides just the websites?
Yes, but that's where, again, I will just emphasize right now, we're a little slim on the staffing side.
Okay.
And so that is something that is a part of our overall council priorities and a part of our strategy with homelessness into this, next year, is really to try to better outreach, better educate, and get information out. And then, of course, I am always happy to come speak with groups. So, if you have organization or groups that would love a presentation like this, me or someone else on our staff, we're happy to do those presentations.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Okay. Any other commissioners?
Good evening. This is Tina on Zoom.
Hi.
I agree. I thought this was a very comprehensive, excellent presentation. Is there any specific plans for homeless youth that are trying to stay in school, whether it's K through 12 or higher education? Any special programs in that area? And then my second comment, I love the idea of partnering with healthcare organizations for the medicine. Was that term street medicine? Is that just a general term or the name of the program? And I love the idea of maybe something compassionate care or something like that. So that's just food for thought.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's just a general term we're using as a part of, discussing what our initiatives are. And as far as youth.
I would just say it is yet to be named.
Okay.
We implement the street medicine, which is a general.
Yeah. So that medicine outreach, healthcare outreach, that's yet to be named. We're just, like I said, we're kind of in the foundational stages of that. And on the youth question, off the top of my head, I don't know. Nothing's popping to mind that's, specifically targeted at youth. But I know we do speak with, the school districts on occasion, and they have, some monitoring of what that homeless youth population is.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Have we gotten everybody? Okay. David, thank you so much. Our next item is a public hearing on the request by Ken Stewart for an ordinance amendment to permit child daycare centers in the CS zone. Our staff person is Yi Lin Wong.
Good evening, Chair and Planning Commissioners. My name is Yilin Wong, Junior Planner, and I'll be presenting item B. So this proposed amendment and application is for amending the zoning ordinance to allow child daycare centers as a conditionally permitted use in the service commercial or CS zone. Currently, the CS zone does not allow child daycare centers. This zoning ordinance amendment would change the code to display a C where there used to be a dash, which indicates that it did not used to be permitted, in Table 25-9 of the zoning ordinance. The image on the screen is what it would look like, except the C would be black, not red. As a refresher on what a conditional use permit is for and why we have some uses as conditionally permitted, defined in the zoning ordinance, a conditional use permit is intended to allow for activities and uses that may not be appropriate for all locations and whose effect on the surrounding environment cannot be determined prior to being proposed for a particular location. Some examples that may apply to a conditional use permit for a child daycare center include capacity, hours of operation, outdoor playtime restrictions, licensing requirements, and compliance with other sections of the zoning and city code. Having this use be conditionally permitted just allows the city to review if the use is appropriate for the subject location. It does not mean it's permitted outright. We still have the authority to review. For child daycare centers specifically, and I'll also define the CS zone. The CS, or Service Commercial District, provides areas for commercial service and light industrial uses that may have impacts not suitable for other commercial districts. Uses in the CS zone are primarily of non-retail character, some of which require outdoor storage or activity areas. Retail and office uses are allowed to the extent that they are compatible with the service commercial uses. The CS zoning district is consistent with the service commercial land use category of the general plan. In the zoning ordinance, child daycare facilities are defined as facilities that provide non-medical care and supervision of children for periods of less than 24 hours. So if child daycare centers are approved to be a conditional use in the CS zone, staff will assess the locations to see if they're compatible with child daycare centers. This ordinance amendment is exempt under CEQA under section 15061B3, common sense exemption that states that CEQA applies only to projects which have potential for causing a significant effect on the environment. This is a text amendment that does not result in any physical change, and it would have no significant environmental impact. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution PC 2022-15, recommending the City Council the approval of Ordinance Amendment OA 2022-005 to allow child daycare centers as a conditionally permitted use in the CS zone. Thank you. Any questions?
Do any members of the commission have questions for staff? Okay. Okay. I'm going to now go into the public hearing. Do I have any speaker cards?
No, we do not have any speaker cards.
Okay. So I will now close the public hearing section and turn it back to the commission for their deliberations.
Good evening. I'd like to disclose that I did speak with the applicant, well, I believe he's the applicant, the owner of the State Farm, location, and we just generally discussed the security for the area. One of the things that I was concerned about is the fact that that area is high transient traffic, and given that we're dealing with children, what will the security fencing and such look like so that the children are protected from loitering or people frequently passing through? And with that, I actually, I have a follow-up question that I thought about on the way here, because when I went to view the property, it's on Beck Ave, and it's right there at the freeway entrance. And I'm just wondering about the outdoor play times and the effects of the emissions from the cars passing by all the time on the freeway, because as you all know, the traffic is really bad there, especially at certain hours, and the property is really, really close to the freeway. So those were the two things. And if you have answers in regards to the play times and the distance maybe to the freeway, well, the yard would be, I'd like to hear about that. Thanks.
Yeah, I would just like to give the commission some greater context here. The application before you today is to allow for daycares in the CS zone as a conditionally permitted use. So that amendment would be citywide. The request is coming from a specific member of our community who has a location on Beck Avenue, as Commissioner Evans is pointing out. And should you approve or recommend to the City Council to approve the zoning ordinance amendment to allow daycares as conditionally permitted uses, that would then allow this applicant to come back to city staff and apply for a use permit. And then it would be at that time, under that use permit review, that we would be reviewing the outdoor playtime for the children and some of those different environmental impacts that you are curious about. But for tonight, that particular site, that very specific site, would not actually be part of this resolution or part of your action this evening.
Thank you for clarifying that, because that brings up another question within, I don't know, it's within a couple of blocks, but it's around the corner on West Texas. There is a fairly large daycare there already. Is that not considered within that same commercial zone?
I would have to look into it. Most of West Texas is now under our Heart of Fairfield zoning designation, so it could be, Heart of Fairfield, West Texas mixed use. I'm not positive without knowing the exact address, but there are several different commercial zoning designations within the city that either do permit daycares or conditionally permit them. The particular zone that Yulin was presenting to us tonight is commercial service. So those zones are typically geared towards auto repair uses, different types of offices, sometimes handicraft type shops, various retail land uses. So they're not it wasn't originally crafted specifically for something like daycare uses. However, there are locations within the city where a CS zone would be appropriate, and that's where the use permit comes into play and gives staff the ability to review and determine whether or not that location is appropriate.
So we are not, I'm sorry, not to hog the floor, but we're not just talking about this one particular zone. We're
Correct.
talking about commercial zones all across the city.
We're talking about service commercial zones all across the city,
Okay,
correct?
thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other commissioner comments or questions?
I do have a comment. I think that this is a great move, frankly. We have parents that are all over the city working, and I see this being a plus in a lot of ways. Number one, making it more convenient for parents to have their kids closer to them. They're already working in that service area, and it can help that way. And the other part that I think might be nice is many of our child care facilities today are really backyard programs, and you end up with a neighbor that has a bunch of kids, and that's great for a cottage industry. But on the other hand, this will give a greater opportunity for people to not have to utilize houses for this purpose. So all around, I think this is a great move.
Okay. Any other commissioner comments?
I have a question, I'm sorry. It's kind of hard for me to, I have some areas memorized, like what's the zone, but so like, is the area where Shelter Inc. is located a commercial zone, or is that more an industrial?
The Beck Avenue location that David Gasway was just speaking about is, if I'm remembering correctly, I believe it's limited industrial. It's a IL zone.
Because my only concern is approving it across the whole city without being able to see the areas, and then we're putting children in areas that may not be comparable with other businesses in that area already. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, understandable. And that's why the proposal tonight is for conditional use permit rather than it being outright permitted, because with the use permit, it does give staff the opportunity to evaluate the surrounding neighborhood and ensure that the location is appropriate. And through our use permit process, we do also, the planning division also touches base with other departments within the city, police, fire, housing, et cetera. So everybody from their respective divisions comes in with their purview, and conditions can be added to the permit to ensure the various aspects of safety for the children, or even hours of operation. I believe, Yulin, you have a slide that kind of covers some of the potential conditions that could be applied. And then, if we find, for whatever reason, the use permit cannot meet our findings of approval, then the application would be denied. Yeah. So yes, that last bullet there is some potential operational conditions that could be applied to an application.
Thank you.
Did we get all the commissioners? Anybody else? So I'm going to ask the question. Do I have a motion to approve item B, resolution PC 2022-15?
I motion we approve resolution PC 2022-15.
Do I have a second?
Tina Werblin, I second.
Mrs. Sheehan, will you conduct the roll call vote?
Yes. Commissioner Paul,
Yes.
Commissioner Greavy,
Yes.
Commissioner Evans,
Yes.
Commissioner Werblin,
Yes.
Commissioner Matthews,
Yes.
Commissioner Cruzen,
Yes.
Chairperson Childs.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next item is item C, a public hearing at the request of the city of Fairfield for a set of zoning ordinance amendments to include Senate Bill 9, development regulations. Our staff person is once again Yi Lin Wong.
I'm back with another one. This is item C, SB 9 ordinance amendment. So, general overview of Senate Bill 9, or SB 9, as I'll be referring to it throughout this presentation. It was passed by Gavin Newsom in 2021, and the bill went into effect January 1st of this year. The bill was created in response to the California housing crisis, and its intent is to encourage more development of affordable housing within the state. There are two application types that come out of this bill: housing development and urban lot split. Sorry. Oh, shoot, sorry. It's not going. Okay. Sorry. At its full potential, property owners are able to split their single-family residential lot into 2 parcels and create up to 4 housing units across both newly divided parcels. The bill requires local agencies to ministerially approve housing development and lot split proposals in single-family residential zones if they meet specific conditions in SB 9. Ministerial approvals are approved after referencing set standards, and ministerial projects do not have public hearings. The state is mandating we approve projects eligible under SB 9. The bill also allows local jurisdictions to adopt objective zoning, subdivision, and design standards for SB 9 developments, provided that they do not conflict with the conditions in the bill itself, which is what the ordinance amendment addresses. Objective standards are measurable with no room for interpretation based on the reader. Tonight, it is with the Planning Commission's purview to review, edit, and approve the proposed objective standards. So going into the proposed ordinance, the new ordinance will be named Section 25.20.3.4 SB 9 Development Regulations. It will cover the purpose, applicability, development regulations, and general restrictions for all housing development projects and lot split projects proposed under SB 9. As a broad introduction, SB 9 in the city of Fairfield applies to single-family residential zones, and it does not apply to any residential zones that already permit multifamily residential development. Most of the information contained in this ordinance is straight from the past Senate bill itself, and the objective standards set by the city are contained in the table and development regulations sections. These regulations will not be more restrictive than existing regulations that apply to the zones affected by this ordinance amendment. And next, I will go into the subsections of the proposed section. So for purpose, the purpose for this section is to define objective development, subdivision, and design standards for projects eligible and applied for under SB 9. And applicability, the SB 9 applications apply to single-family residential zones in the city. It is not applicable to properties in historic districts. Please note that we do not have any historic districts in the city of Fairfield currently. And it does not apply to projects that require the demolition or alteration of any of the following. So housing subject to a recorded covenant, ordinance, or law that restricts rent to levels affordable to persons and families of moderate, low, or very low income. Housing that is subject to any form of rent or price control through a public entity's valid exercise of its police power. Housing that has been occupied by a tenant in the last 3 years, or demolition or alteration of more than 25% of existing exterior structural walls, unless the site has not been occupied by a tenant in the last 3 years. All of these applicability regulations are mandated by the bill. And next, we go into the objective standards. So staff has prepared regulations to implement the state law. The regulations contained in the table are objective standards, which again are measurable with no room for interpretation. The numerical values are subject to Planning Commission review. So the regulations in the table are divided into two main sections, site planning and buildings. Starting with site planning, we have lot area, lot dimensions, parking, and landscaping. And under building, we have dwelling unit size, maximum floor area ratio, setbacks, building height limits, roof pitch line, wall plane transparency, and trim around windows and doors. I can discuss in more detail these different standards that we have. And all of these regulations are subject to Planning Commission review, except for rear and side setbacks, which are mandated by the state. More on housing development regulations. This is information already embedded in the development regulation table, but we must allow up to 2 residential units with a minimum of 800 square feet on a proposed SB9 development. And shown in the exhibit on the screen, where the black square is indicative of the original parcel. When a housing project consisting of 2 units is developed on an existing parcel not resulting from an urban lot split, up to 2 accessory dwelling units may be added to the parcel under current ADU law. The city zoning ordinance section that regulates accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units, so ADUs and JDUs, allow for 1 detached ADU and 1 JADU on a property with a proposed or existing single-family dwelling, including a duet. So on the left, you'll see the 2 allowed primary dwelling units under SB9 with the JADU and the ADU. And on the right is kind of the same thing, just in duet form. Of course, you're allowed to have just 1 primary dwelling unit as well. Next, we'll go into lot split development regulations. This applies to SB9 applications that contain lot splits only and no proposed development as part of the SB9 application. So a parcel map created by a lot split shall create no more than 2 new parcels of approximately equal lot area with the minimum size of one of the resulting lots at 40% of the lot area of the original parcel proposed for subdivision. So the smallest size of the new lot that's created can't be less than 40% of the original lot. Subject parcel to be subdivided, so the original parcel, as part of the urban lot split, must not have been established through prior exercise of the urban lot split. So if you do it once and you have a new parcel out of that, you can't split that new parcel again under SB9. And neither the owner or of the parcel being subdivided nor any person acting in concert with the owner can have previously subdivided an adjacent parcel using an urban lot split provided for an SB9 or this section. And then this exhibit shows options under the lot split. So you can have your original parcel show with the black square and you just want to split it and that's all you want to do. So that's on the left. And on the right is someone did the left, and then 2 new tenants come in, or people who want to build on there, but they're building not with a SB9 application. So they're not allowed the 2 dwelling units, it's just normal under our normal zoning development regulations. And so here are housing and lot split development regulations when they're combined. When an urban lot split is combined with a housing development, project development, no ADUs or JADUs are permitted on the new parcels. The bill gives jurisdictions the authority to include this regulation. So on the screen, you'll see someone comes in with an SB9 application and they want to do both the housing development and the lot split in this same application. They can't have any ADUs, so they are allowed to split the lot and they can have up to 2 units on each lot, but they must be primary dwelling units. And then going into utilities objective standards, because SB9 requires eligible projects to be approved ministerially, that means these projects would also be not subject to any public works conditions if not already included in our objective standards. The following conditions are the objective standards that would be required by our Public Works Department for housing and lot split applications under SB9. So these would include water meter, water service, public sewer cleanout, sewer service. Each separate unit must have their own utilities. other conditions for public service easements, and they would have to implement city standards for driveways and sidewalks. General restrictions. These come from the bill itself. These restrictions are to ensure the housing stays affordable. So we have owner occupancy. The owner and applicant must sign an affidavit stating that they intend to occupy one of the housing units as their principal residence for a minimum of 3 years from the date of the approval of the urban lot split. The second one, short-term rentals are not allowed for projects under SB 9, and those are defined by rentals of 30 days or less. And the city also has the right to deny a project proposal if the development would result in a specific adverse impact upon public health or safety of the physical environment. This ordinance is exempt under CEQA for under the common sense exemption because it does. It's a text amendment that makes changes that does not affect the physical environment, and it is also under sections listed above in the government code that CEQA does not apply to the approval of ministerial projects. So extremely broad summary. SB 9 applies to single-family residential zones. The bill effectively allows for up to 4 units to be developed on any original parcel proposed for development or lot split under SB 9. For housing development projects, jurisdictions are required to allow up to 2 800-square-foot units on a single parcel. For lot splits, you can split an eligible lot into 2 parcels, and the resulting parcels must be at least 40% of the lot area of the original parcel. And then restrictions set by SB 9 and development regulations set by the city will still apply. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution PC 2022-16, recommending the City Council the approval of Ordinance Amendment OA 2022-003. Any questions? Thanks.
Commissioners? Any questions for staff?
As I do understand, this amendment has been associated because of the Senate Bill 9, and which was passed in 2021, and it took effect from January 1st, 2022. So it has been almost a year. So does it usually take that much time? Is time frame that it takes a year to adopt us to that SB Senate bill?
It doesn't have to take a year. We maybe could have been here a little sooner with it. In January of this year, we were a division of 2 people, and Yelan was an intern at that time. So apologies, it is coming to you a little later than when it was initially in effect. However, we had not received any applications this year. Silver lining, I suppose, because starting January 2022, anybody could have applied under SB 9 for these standards. So we are playing a little bit of catch up here, but moving forward, now that we've got this in or I shouldn't speak so freely, if you guys pass this resolution and the City Council also passes the ordinance, then we will have the regulations in place for any future applications.
Any other commissioner comments or questions? I will now open the public hearing. Do we have any speaker cards?
We do not.
Okay. So I can close the public hearing and turn it back to the commission for any further deliberations.
This is Tina on Zoom. Chairperson, did we confirm if we had public comments via Zoom?
We do not have any public comments via Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no further comments, I'm going to ask the question. Do I have a motion to approve item C, Resolution PC 2022-16? Do I have a second?
I do second.
Mrs. Sheehan, will you conduct the roll call vote?
Do we get a motion?
Oh,
Did you make the motion? I'm sorry.
I said, yeah, I did make a motion to approve it.
Oh, typically another commissioner should make the motion
Oh,
than
I'm
the
sorry.
chair, but we could do it that way. It's not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead with the roll call. Commissioner Paul,
Yeah.
Commissioner Greavy,
Yes.
Commissioner Evans,
Yes.
Commissioner Warblin,
Yes.
Commissioner Matthews,
Yes.
Commissioner Cruzen,
Yes.
Chairperson Childs.
Yes. So now we'll move to our next agenda item. It's the director's reports.
Yes, I have just a few items for you all. I wanted to give the commission a heads up that come January, we will have several large projects for your review. One of the items is Planning Area 1 within our train station specific plan. So that is a master developed community. The Master Plan Unit Development Permit, or MPUD permit, we love our acronyms, covers over, I think it's 14 property owners. I'm sorry, I can't think of the acreage off the top of my head, but it's at the corner of Cement Hill Road and Peabody Road, and it would encompass several single-family residential zones as well as some multifamily residential zones, new pocket parks, new private community rec facilities, and a new segment of the linear park. So it is quite a meaty project. It'll have a lot of layers to it. So we will do our best to groom through each item with you, and that is targeted for early January Planning Commission date. Additionally, we are looking to bring forth the housing element for your guys' review as well. That's most likely going to be the later January date, and that will be something for you guys to pass on to the City Council. And then sometime early next year as well, we will be bringing the Green Valley 3 Spanos Apartment Draft Environmental Impact Report for your guys' review. So that particular meeting will not have an action. Rather, it will be your opportunity to provide comment on the environmental document. If you believe any aspects have been overlooked or need to be evaluated further, that would be the time to make those comments. It'll also be an opportunity for the general public to make comments on the document as well. So all three of those fairly large items will be coming to you early next year. So just giving you all some fair warning. We'll do our very best to get information to you as soon as we can. I also wanted to note that there is no planning commission on December 28th. We don't have any items tracking for that. I'm sure nobody really wants to be here on the 28th. Hopefully everyone is enjoying their holidays. And that is all I have for you.
Do any commissioners have any comments or any news to share?
I think all
I
I can
do
say
have a-
is, sorry, all I can say is Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all of you guys. Thank you.
Yes, Tina?
Thank you. I had a comment for the housing element that's coming. Do you know if there'll also be public comments outside of the Planning Commission? I know in the past they had several meetings when they were developing these housing plans. I was just curious if that was going to happen.
We have Dave Feinstein coming to the dais here to answer.
Thank you.
Yes. Hello, Commissioner Warblin. This is Dave Feinstein, Interim Community Development Director. So the housing element, a draft of it, did come to you already for public comment. So we've had our primary review period for the public to look at that as a draft. It will be we're in the process of making some edits. We've been in discussions with the state, the Housing and Community Development Department for the state, so we've gotten some comments from them. We will be making some edits to that document prior to it coming back to the Planning Commission. And as a part of that, we will put it back out for additional public comment. State law requires a 7-day review period, so there'll be a 7-day period probably late December, early January, where it will be out for additional public comment. That won't be in front of the Planning Commission, though. When we do bring it back to the Planning Commission, likely in late January, that will be one more opportunity for public comment. So there will be a public hearing on that document. So multiple opportunities for public comment. That 7-day review, that'll be a written comment opportunity, and then when it comes back before the Planning Commission at a full public hearing. Following the Planning Commission, the item would go to the City Council, likely in early February, at which point there will be another public hearing in front of the City Council. So lots of opportunities for public input still.
Thank you. I just remember previous meetings, there was feedback regarding people not being aware, even though it was, the staff did their due diligence, just making sure that the public is aware.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. We'll put that out. We'll put press release as well as notice in the paper. So.
Thank you. Do any other commissioners have any further comments or newsworthy information to share?
I will share one thing. It has come to my attention that the bus service there was a bus service contract between Sassoon and Fairfield, and it was Solano Transportation Authority, and I believe FAST, and that has dissolved, so there will no longer be bus service between Fairfield and Sassoon. I'm almost curious if we could get like a report of where we're going with some of our transportation options like bus service, because I know we were discussing having housing in the area of like the Fairfield transfer station or the Fairfield transit, I'm sorry, the correct name is leaving me, but the transfer station. We were discussing like maybe in the future, maybe possibly like housing being developed in that area surrounding the bus services. So I'm wondering if maybe in the future it would be worth it to have maybe FAST present or Solano Transportation Authority again, but I think that part is under FAST.
Yes, I can coordinate with Public Works staff that works in the Fairfield Transit Center. You had all the right words in different orders. Yeah, we can coordinate with different Public Works staff to see if they could put together a brief presentation similar to how we had somebody from the Homeless Services Division come. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll just add one item. So FAST did complete an operational study that does sort of lay out sort of a plan for future operations. So if the commission would like that kind of a presentation, we can ask. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yes, this is to the Planning Commission or Planning Department, and I know that you have nothing on your plate, so I thought I would maybe give you an opportunity to stay busy. I would really appreciate it. I've spoken to a number of people, and one of the things that we keep hearing is that we need greater housing density in order to achieve our goals and provide affordable housing. Could staff come back with something, maybe go out to other communities and find out, can we get that density up to 35 or 45 units per acre and address our height limit in a more manageable way that'll make it, more functional for development?
Yes, no, we can definitely bring that back. I would imagine just with the oncoming items for you, it may be February or March. Hopefully that's all right.
June.
It would probably be a little bit towards the end of the first quarter, but that's definitely something we can look into and provide information on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have to say Merry Christmas to everyone.
Okay. I wish everybody the same. Seeing none? Once? Twice? 3 times a lady? No, I'm sorry. No. Okay. Okay, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Have a good evening.